an overwhelming smell of blood and heat and effort. And it was dark. The windows were closed, doors shut, while filled with a support system of family and friends, and women who knew what they were doing. These women are experts in the field of welcoming life into this world. There was nothing certain or comfortable about this atmosphere of this room, and there was so much that I wanted to ask, but something about the intensity of the midwives and the panting resignation of the laboring mothers stopped me. Because I then realized that I was witnessing the precious, profound, and deeply personal moments before the world rearranges to incorporate new life. I've seen this woman and half a dozen others deliver a baby, 7 women. They have taught me presence, power, and given me a perspective on the world that I'm still trying to uncover. In August of last year, I decided to study birth, and I soon discovered a role that I didn't know existed, let alone needed to be filled: a doula. A doula is a non-medical birth professional that offers emotional, physical, educational, and spiritual support before, during, and after the process of childbirth. To me, this seemed like the perfect opportunity to practice hands-on activism. Because in the shadow of climate change, it can be really overwhelming to decide how to be of service to a world that is in such distress. Especially here at Greenstone, where we learn about these systemic injustices, and then many of us go back to our home countries on breaks or when we graduate, and I have a shared experience with many of my classmates of walking into a Target or a Costco and breaking down in the middle of the aisle. Because when we look up, we realize that we're part of a capitalist system that allows climate change to be the harsh reality that it is. So in my 2 years at Greenstone, I've spoken and written and advocated for some really important issues. But at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, what have I really done? What is hands-on? What is direct? This is the question that propelled me to place myself at life's beginning. Being radical simply means grasping things at the root, and the root of life is birth. So if we're really going to make a difference, it's vital that we consider where and how we begin. When I first saw life begin, I didn't know what I was seeing. It was just this weirdly shaped little bulge of something that resembled wet hair, and when someone finally said, "It's the head," I was in awe. And then the placenta came, and I had to run outside so I wouldn't faint because I've never seen more blood in my life. But besides that, it was beautiful. Because this mom had no pain medication, no medical intervention, but most importantly, no one telling her what she should or shouldn't be doing in the process of childbirth. She got up, she walked around, she went outside, and she placed her feet on Mama Earth, and finally, when she was ready, she gave birth in her husband's arms. So here I am, this trained, excited, and passionate doula. It was feeding my feminist soul, and I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. So I FaceTimed my 89-year-old Southern grandma, I call her Gaga, because I wanted to share these experiences with her. And so I FaceTimed her one day, and she goes, "Hi, darling." And I'm like, "Hi, how are you?" And she tries not to make a face when I tell her about the classes on climate change I'm taking, because she doesn't believe in that. And then I start telling her about the women that I'm watching bring life into this world, and how amazing I think it is that some women do it without any medical intervention. And she goes, "Hun, that is ridiculous. Now why in the world would anyone do something like that if they had the choice?" And then she starts telling me one of her own birth stories and goes, "You know, when I was giving birth to your dad, I went to the hospital as soon as my contractions started, but I waited in the waiting room for as long as possible to watch the Texas Longhorns football game." And I thought that was really sweet. But then she goes, "And all the doors down the hall where the women were laboring had their husband's name on them. Not the woman's name, "Hun, you have to understand it was a different time." And then she gave me this look that only Southern grandmas could give and waited for my reaction, knowing that I probably wouldn't like what she had said. I didn't react, I just let it go. But in thinking about it later, I realized that it's a not so discreet example of a woman being shown very little respect or recognition, even while giving life. And it's also a not so discreet example of the absence of the autonomous self. Throughout this year, I've been in the process, I've witnessed women take back their bodily autonomy, and I've also been in the process of discovering what that means for me. After 40 hours with a mom in labor, I was finally home, and I sat sobbing in the shower, covered in piss and blood and amniotic fluid and puke and shit. And I thought back to the beginning of my journey as a doula and what a fairy tale it was. But recently, the births that I've been at had started testing me through physically and emotionally draining experiences. But mostly, they were transforming me spiritually. Because witnessing birth allows us to get as close to possible to where we come from. It forces us into presence. And no one knows as surely as a woman in labor how little control we actually have. But no one knows as surely as a woman who gives birth how much power we possess. It's similar to what spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle says when he explains that actually self-esteem and humility are the same thing, just like power and vulnerability are the same thing. The women who I watch embody this have an inherent understanding that they're going to choose their internal power over external forces. They have trust in themselves, in life, and therefore in birth. If they're a first-time mom, that's pretty amazing because they've never witnessed their vagina open up wide enough for a baby's head to fit through. And I mean, most of us, when we look down there, think, no way, at least for a while. It's hard enough growing up as a young woman and learning how to put a tampon in or a diva cup. One woman told me that she had dreams of dying in childbirth the night before, but she knew they were symbolic. She said she was dying to an old version of herself and giving birth to not only her baby, but herself as a mother. And this showed me that we have to surrender before we can create. Sadly, we are not taught that surrendering is the way to go in life or in birth. And that has really dangerous consequences. In the US, the over-medicalized model for childbirth placed devaluing and distrusting a woman's body at the heart of it. And the consequences of that are that we have the worst maternal mortality rate in the developed world. 1 in 3 women who give birth in a hospital have a C-section, which goes against the World Health Organization's guidelines for under 10% of women to be having C-sections. And less than 1% of births in the US take place or at home or in a birth center. If you are a Black woman in the US, you are 3 times as likely to die during childbirth than a white woman, and that rises to 12 times as likely in New York City. And while childbirth remains over-medicalized and non-evidence-based, it now may be 99 years in prison for a doctor in Alabama who helps a woman exercise her right to choose. People are literally being criminalized for helping women take ownership of their bodies. One time, my birth control for 1 month cost me over $200, but yet where you can get it for free at Planned Parenthood remains under threat to be defunded by the US president. And we have abstinence-only sex education. A few weeks ago, on a night out, one of my friends here was raped. And last year, one of my friends stood up here and told all of you about the assaults that are happening on this island and in this school. Now, I don't want to be talking about any of this, and it may be hard to see how all of these relate to each other, and it was for me at first. But throughout this year, I've had to use my skills as a birth doula to support my friends and I through some really, really difficult shit. Speaking of shit, one of my friends, Christiana, and I decided that we were going to make free pads and tampons available at the school because we decided that if they wouldn't let us walk around with shit stains by providing us with toilet paper, then they shouldn't let us walk around with blood stains and provide us with pads and tampons. It was an uphill battle to get the funding because we still have a patriarchal model here at this school and we're only going more towards that, sadly. It was quite a kerfuffle, to say the least. Because we have to prove that we're not only worthy, but that we're trustworthy as women, and that when we ask for things that are actually basic human rights, they're not a luxury. It is obvious to most of us here at Green School that we are out of touch with the natural cycles of the earth, but I would also argue that we are out of touch with the reproductive cycle. Birth is a microcosm of systemic injustice. And it's no wonder because we set this tone for our society by the way that we are brought into it. When we take ownership of a woman's body out of her hands and place it into the hands of someone else, the scales are thrown off balance. To rebalance, we must collectively stop buying into the shame that convinces us to devalue ourselves, especially women, but that goes for everyone. And we must question everything and make small, radical changes, at least to start with. My perspective on these issues has grown throughout the last year, and I've come to understand that we can't change the system all at once, and I can't ask every one of you to change all at once. But even by showing these pictures of birth and vaginas here today is a small radical step, because I saw your faces and I know it makes you uncomfortable. And that's okay. And that's okay, because we're getting there. And I think we can begin by first taking ownership over our bodies, and therefore ourselves. Thank you.